It has somehow been nearly 5 years since the original Bayonetta came out on the Xbox 360 and PS3, and now in 2014, Bayonetta is back in an unexpected new home, the Nintendo Wii U. How does the sequel fare? Here's our review. When the original Bayonetta came out in 2010, it was an unexpected joy for me. I'd button mashed my way through a couple character action games in the past, but none of them had ever grabbed me quite the way Bayonetta did. Something about the combination of smooth, responsive, over-the-top combat, this iconic, very unique protagonist, and a setting that seemed more concerned with being fun than making sense just really made me excited to play the game. There was actually so much to like about the original Bayonetta that I wound up beating the game and playing it all the way through, which is something I didn't do a lot of back in those days. To me, Bayonetta 2's biggest accomplishment is how it successfully recaptures everything I loved about Bayonetta 1 and even improves upon it in a couple of key spots. Now, for those unfamiliar, Bayonetta is a character action game that's in the same style of and conceived by the same man as the Devil May Cry series. The crucial difference, though, between Bayonetta and other character action games are twofold. First, there's the witch time mechanic, which rewards players for dodging enemy attacks by temporarily slowing down time, allowing you to wail on enemies. And the second and much more obvious difference is that Bayonetta and its sequel Bayonetta 2 are two of the most visually intense video games ever conceived. Everything in Bayonetta, from your attacks to your enemies to the music, is so big, loud, and fast that it can be genuinely hard to know what's going on, but that's absolutely a design choice, and it's actually one that I really like.
My head feels like it's gonna burst. Ugh.
It's virtually impossible to press any series of buttons in Bayonetta 2 and not see something cool happen. The decision to be as overstimulating as possible is a fundamental part of what made Bayonetta 1 such a singular experience, and it's something that the sequel completely nails. That chaos extends to the story as well, which is an inscrutable, nonsensical mess. The script is bananas, full of conversations that are more concerned with sounding snarky than ever actually making any sense. That's not to say that it's not entertaining. They're so damn silly and tonally odd that I never skipped a single one of the cutscenes. Just don't go into it expecting it to be even remotely coherent. Obviously though, the main draw in Bayonetta 2 is going to be the combat, and honestly, I struggle to find anything negative to say about it. 5 years later, Witch Time is still the single most satisfying counter system in the history of third-person action games, and it fills every single combat encounter with about a dozen tiny micro-victories. There's an incredible rhythm to the combat in Bayonetta 2, and it's not long before you start nailing dodges on instinct rather than waiting for visual or sonic cues. That's basically just a long way of saying that Bayonetta 2 feels incredibly good to play. Actually, feel is the word that I keep coming back to when trying to describe why I love Bayonetta 2's combat so much. Pulling off combos feels incredible, every weapon feels utterly distinct, the enemies all feel very different to fight. It sounds obvious, but this game wouldn't work if they didn't nail the feel of the combat, and luckily they absolutely did. The even bigger reason, though, that Bayonetta 2 works from start to finish is thanks to something else entirely: variety. From the mission structure to the enemy designs to the weapons to even the gameplay itself, everything in Bayo 2 is in a state of constant flux. From frequent and hugely varied boss encounters to rail shooter sequences to one part that involves surfing on the inside of a water tornado, there is no shortage of things in Bayonetta 2 to do, and they are all different from the thing right before it and the thing right after it. Within the first 10 minutes, I found myself riding an angelic horse against its will on top of a jet that is spinning through downtown New York City. Not much later, I found myself fighting on a small Super Mario Galaxy-style spheric arena, whereupon I spanked an enemy to death. The amount of gameplay variety Bayonetta 2 accomplishes is unlike anything else in its genre. You are never doing the same thing for more than 5 minutes, and it makes it a blast to play. That's actually one of the main things that sets Bayonetta 2 apart from its predecessor. For everything I did love about Bayonetta 1, there were occasional moments of fatigue where it all began to feel a little bit repetitive. Bayonetta 2, which I played much more of than Bayonetta 1 in a much shorter period of time, almost never gave me that feeling.
I don't know what you did to piss her off, but whatever it was, nice.
Of course, it would be impossible to talk about a Platinum game without talking about the difficulty, and Bayonetta 2 has some genuinely extremely hard moments in there. Frankly, I died a lot playing Bayonetta 2, but I also had some of the most genuinely satisfying victories I've had in years in a video game. There were at least 3 or 4 major boss encounters in the game that I just barely scraped through with a tiny sliver of health left, and those were some of the most fist-pumping, exciting moments I've had in a game in a very, very long time. Bayonetta 2 is one of the rare modern games where death has consequence. Each death in Bayonetta 2 results in a skull and crossbone accumulated on your game over screen, which at the end of a chapter results in huge penalties to the amount of halos that you're given at the end of a stage. Because halos are the currency you use to unlock everything in Bayonetta 2, from item unlocks to new moves to new costumes, these matter a lot to you as a player, and as a result, dying feels consequential.
Little one, are you all right?
Yeah, I'm fine, love.
Conversely though, Bayonetta 2 is riddled with very generous checkpoints, so if you're the type of player who just wants to fight through the game, barely win every encounter, and just see yourself through to the end, that's totally possible. It's actually one of the few things about Bayonetta 2 that makes it seem the most like a Nintendo game. It strikes the very, very delicate balance between remaining a game that hardcore players can play through and be satisfied by, but is also a game that newcomers can fake their way through and still have a good time.
Shit! We're not going to make it!
Bayonetta 2 is also a remarkably pretty game, especially when you take into account that it's running on the Wii U. In particular, the character model faces look so good that I actually didn't realize the game was running in real time on the Wii U hardware until I started changing my character's costumes. Likewise, the framerate is remarkably stable, and excluding just one area where it chugged a little bit, the game was extremely smooth from start to finish. Bayonetta 2 might even have been a contender for one of the prettiest games of the year if it weren't for one thing: an undeniable jagginess to all the visuals. Perhaps the lack of anti-aliasing was a trade-off necessary to keep the game running at a smooth frame rate, which is crucial for fast-paced action games like this, but ultimately it is a little distracting and kind of takes away from a otherwise gorgeous game. As pretty and visually inventive as Bayonetta 2 is, it also doesn't hurt that the world of the game is just a hell of a lot of fun to spend time in. Not even one chapter in, this game makes it clear that it is operating on a scale that other games simply are not. This game is unabashedly, gleefully dumb, and the sheer enormity and stupidity of Bayonetta 2's goings-on are unparalleled inside or outside of video games. The character designs are better than ever too, with a new enemy type called Infernals that look nothing like anything else in the world of Bayonetta. Bayonetta 2 serves as an incredible reminder that the sense of cool they've developed over at Platinum Games is unlike anything else in the industry. Combine fantastic enemy designs with the radically different environments you find yourself fighting in, and another stellar, highly anachronistic soundtrack by Masami Ueda, and it's clear that Bayonetta 2 is a game that really, really wants to entertain you. It's one thing to make a game that's visually busy, but Bayonetta 2 isn't just busy, it's also constantly serving up fresh ideas unlike anything else in any other game you'll play this year. So briefly, let's talk about the fact that this is a Wii U game. Now, in case anyone was worried, no, there are no touchscreen-based minigames or QuickTime events or anything like that. Bayonetta 2 is, thankfully, a game completely undistracted by the platform it's on. Yes, there are optional touch controls, but it's pretty much the equivalent of the very easy difficulty that you might remember from Bayonetta 1. Essentially, you just tap an enemy on the touchscreen once, and then watch as Bayonetta automatically strings together incredible combos with very little involvement from you as a player. It's not very thrilling, but it's also totally easy to skip. It is 100% possible to play through Bayonetta 2 from start to finish without even ever touching the touchscreen once, which is basically exactly what I did. There's also an online co-op mode that has you and a teammate taking on 6 short battles against enemies that you fight in the single-player campaign. The online actually ran surprisingly smooth in my time with it, and was a fun way to learn firsthand how other, better Bayonetta players play the game, but it's not the main draw of the game, obviously, it's the story and the surrounding content. Before playing Bayonetta 2, I didn't know that I needed another Bayonetta, mostly because I'd mentally checked Bayonetta off as an experience that I had already had. Luckily, each of Bayonetta 2's 16 chapters feels totally distinct, whether it's what you're doing, where it's happening, or what you're fighting. Bayonetta 2 retains the fun-first spirit of the first game while bringing a new variety that makes it even easier to recommend than the first title. It's visually overwhelming, completely overstimulating, and I wouldn't have it any other way. So that's what I thought of Bayonetta 2. I think if you measure games and how much they make you smile while playing them, then Bayonetta 2 has to be one of my favorites of the year in that regard. Thank you guys for watching this. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I read every comment and do my best to answer every single one. Or you can find me on Twitter. I am twitter.com/Babylonian. But yeah, we have a ton more reviews to come this season. The holiday season is just now beginning, so stay tuned. In the meantime, thank you for watching.
Any longtime fan of Borderlands can tell you the series is composed of 3 main things: a sarcastic, witty sense of humor, lots and lots of shooting, and more loot than any one person could ever feasibly need. It's safe to say the pre-sequel continues that tradition, putting its own spin on the franchise, taking players away